My name is Wesley Thomas, and I'm one of the directors of Abolish Abortion Texas. And I live down in the Houston area, and I'm a precinct chair for my local county Republican Party. And I've been that for going on a couple years now. And I've been involved in politics since about 2015, maybe 2014-ish. Been working on abolition for since, 2016 was when we ran a first resolution at a Republican Party convention. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that process and kind of what it did for us. I'm going to move this over a little bit. My OCD says you should be standing in the center of the podium. So I just wanted to talk about that and share some experiences, and then also talk about some of the legislation we'd be doing and kind of share the experiences at the state level. And maybe let's talk about local level too. What else is going on? But first, I want to, again, kind of survey the room. How many of you, just show of hands, would call yourself and are okay with calling yourself pro-life? Okay. 2, maybe, a couple, okay. And how many of you are like, well, I'm going to call myself abolitionist? Okay, that's the majority of you, okay. And I do that because as you get into this, and I'm sure a lot of you already know this, there are a lot of people out there who call themselves pro-life. And my experience has been that the people who call themselves pro-life think that that means we want to end abortion. That's what they think. Well, that's also what I think. So I like to know who I'm talking to. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this particular talk about those distinctions. There's a lot of other people who have been giving talks at this conference and many more before this. There are numerous lectures on the subject. There are people in this audience who are better qualified to answer those questions. And frankly, I'm not going to say everything that I believe in this talk. I'm simply going to focus on the political aspect. But I am an abolitionist, and I would call myself an abolitionist, and I would not go by the label pro-life. But I'm not going to necessarily go up to people and say in a political environment that I'm not pro-life unless it's under the right circumstances. And we'll get into that a little bit here in a bit, and I'll explain to you why I would do that or why I wouldn't do that. How many of you are already active in the Oklahoma? Actually, let's do this. How many of you actually reside in Oklahoma? Okay, cool. So some of you are out of state. How many of you were active in your local Republican Party, either in Oklahoma or beyond? All right, great. A lot of folks, great. All right, so we already did we're going to go for 3 hours question. So what is AATX? How many of you have heard of AATX or Abolish Abortion Texas and kind of familiar with what we've been doing already? All right. So our mission is to abolish abortion in Texas, clearly by our name, by mobilizing Christians to influence civil government in obedience with the Great Commission. Why do we exist? Well, we started several years ago when we noticed that there was a lack of legislation that actually was trying to end abortion. Because being, pro-life at the time, right, that's what we would call ourselves back in 2015, we're like, well, aren't we wanting to end abortion? Isn't that what this means? And so we started saying, well, what would it look like if we actually tried to craft a bill that actually criminalized abortion, right? Made it illegal. Said, no, you can't murder your baby. And that's where AATX started. January of 2016, we did something, which I'm going to talk about at length in a few minutes. And it led us kind of to this place. But that was where it started, was just asking the question, like, why are there no bills that are seeking to completely outlaw abortion? We say we want to do this. We all say that, but why is it? And that's when we came across the idea of abolitionism. It was about in February of 2016 when I saw Russell and the team. I saw Russie Thomas at the Oklahoma State Capitol talking to Tony Lallinger and talking to the legislators there. And I said, yes, that's what we want to do. We're wanting to do that. Like, we're going there, but we're actually beginning perhaps a little bit upstream of that process. We're beginning in the Republican Party. And I called those guys up and said, hey, we should talk, because I loved what you did at the Capitol. We're going to get there. But first, we're starting at the Republican Party level, and I want to know why you didn't. Like, what's going on here? Let's help each other out. And so we ended up meeting and talking about all of these issues. And that's kind of where we started. All right, let's see here. Oh, you know what I didn't do, JR, is I didn't hit record on this slideshow. I was warned. All right, now we're actually recording on the slideshow. All right, so where are we heading? What are we trying to do? Well, did it work? Oh no, my transitions aren't working. Slight technical difficulty. This is why we need 3 hours. Oh, I switched. That's definitely not what I wanted. You can read my notes now. Let's try this again. JR, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to record this. There we go. It's working now. I don't know what that was about. Thank you, Apple. All right, where are we headed? Where are we going? Well, I think we're trying to change the law. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what AATX is trying to do. I'm trying to change the law through this organization. I'm trying to affect public policy. But I'm also trying to change the culture, right? I'm going to assume, since most of you raised your hands that said you were abolitionists, you have no problem with me saying the words, I'm going to change the culture? That no one has an issue with that? Okay, sometimes there is an issue with that, right? I'm sure you've run into that issue. If you're talking with churches, they're like, change the culture, what are you talking about? Okay, I'm not gonna belabor that point. We all agree on that. We are trying to change the culture because that is a good thing, right? Yes, we don't want the culture murdering people. Yes, it is good to desire them not to do that, right? Okay, good. We don't have to belabor that. So we're trying to change the law. We're trying to change the culture. Now, one of the things that we talked about in Idaho, I went up to Idaho a few months back, I think. Don't exactly remember the month now. It's been a few days. And somebody said something there that I thought was really good. I think it was Russell that said this. Until the number of abolitionists calling for abolition exceeds the number of pro-lifers, or the pro-life leaders, as I like to say, calling for the delay of abolition, then we will not succeed, right? And let's put this another way. Until we change the culture sufficiently to achieve a critical mass of people demanding abolition, we will not affect lasting change in policy. Now, we don't exactly know what is the right ratio of people, right? Like, well, how many people do we need? How many abolitionists do I need in order to make this work? Well, I have no idea. Does anybody else? Because I would love to know, because that'd be a much easier goal. And then I could go tell people, well, this is how much it's going to take, and then I can say, well, this is how much it's going to cost, right? But I don't know. God knows. And that's what we might call the results aspect, right? We are going to apply the work, and God is going to give us the results. So we don't know how many it's going to take, but how do we get there? What's it going to take to get there? Well, that's what this talk is about. Is I think what should we be doing? That could be a subtitle of this talk. Is like, what should I do? Well, this is perhaps not the only thing that you should do. I mean, you're already doing things, right? Like, you're abolitionists. You're doing things. You believe that doing things that's part of being an abolitionist, right? Going out, engaging the culture. The two modes, right? Assistance, agitation. Assistance. I'm just going to read the summaries here. Helping the helpless, right? Visiting the orphans and the widows. James 1:27, religion pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, to keep one unstained from the world. I mean, we believe that, right? We should be doing that. Agitation, destroying speculations, undermining misinformation, awakening the apathetic. This is the Great Commission, right? Go into the world, preach the gospel. disciple the nations, etc. That's what we're talking about when we say agitation. So all of this is, bound up in these two concepts, or these two modes, is preaching. You're doing preaching, you're doing teaching, you're doing education, you're doing discipleship, and all of this. But in Idaho, I said something which I thought might be a bit controversial, but no one yelled at me or threw anything at me. But I said, I think there might be a room for another mode here. And I've been saying this for a while now. I think we need another mode. And we came up with another word that begins with A, so we didn't ruin the symmetry. But the word that I've been using is advocacy. Advocacy. Now, what is advocacy? And how is it different than the other two? So the word advocate is a person who publicly supports or recommends a particular cause or a policy. A person who pleads on someone else's behalf, or a pleader in court of law, a lawyer. That's an advocate. As a verb, when you go advocate, you are publicly recommending or supporting. And the word advocate, advocate, the Latin, is about calling, right? So we're still preaching, we're still teaching, and so it's, there's a Venn diagram here where these kind of all overlap a little bit. It's not that totally different. But I'm using the word advocate or advocacy because I want to draw some distinctions about roles and what we should be doing when we advocate. And I believe there might be a gap in our civil society, in our civil government. I believe there's a gap. There's a lack of Christians there doing the preaching and the teaching and discipleship. And I believe that that's partially to blame for some of the results that we see and some of the results that we're unhappy about within that level. And so that's why I want to say, that's why I want to use the word advocacy so that I can talk about this specific aspect of the preaching and the teaching. So my definition of advocacy would be defending and advancing God's standard of righteousness and justice in society at the places where a nation, state, or community is organized, administered, and regulated. All right, so these places, for shorthand, we're just going to call these places government. That's easy, right? There's a lot of levels of government. We're going to get into that and talk about that, but we're just going to call that government. But that is the places where a nation, state, and community is organized or administered or regulated. And being involved in this administration and in this government, we're going to call that politics. So all three of these share in common the discipleship aspect, I believe, because there's discipleship in every single one of these. But politics is just the activities associated with governance. Now, I'm sure no one here thinks this. No one here thinks that we shouldn't be involved in politics, but I hear this sometimes. Christians shouldn't be involved in politics, or politics is a waste of time. I shouldn't be doing it. How many of you have heard that from people you've talked to about abolition? Yeah, I hear it all the time. In fact, one of the reasons that maybe I'll get to here in a bit, but one of the reasons I actually like going to do local politics is the people who are there, well, they don't think that, right? Because they're there, right? When you talk to people on the street about caring about, preborn children, there's a certain level of apathy there that you have to break through. You do not encounter that in politics. Now, you might encounter that when it comes to the left, those who are pro-choice or pro-abortion, you definitely will encounter that. But on the right, the apathy is not there like you would on the average person on the street. So there's a different, let's say, quality of person, if you will, with respect to your ability to get them to accept abolition. That's what I mean when I say quality. Like, how easy is it when you're dealing with people who are already involved in politics? At the political level, it is a lot easier. Someone's blowing up my phone and I forgot to mute it. Mute. So I do have a complaint that I want to voice here briefly. For a few years, and I'm sure some of you have heard this as well. Let's say you go to a church, or let's say you go to speak to people at a church or perhaps pastors, and you say specifically to pastors, Pastor, what are God's words to me as a father and also to my wife? And pastor, opens up God's word and he says, well, obey God, love each other, love and discipline your children. Okay, that's God's words to parents. Great. Pastor, what are God's words to my children? Well, your children need to obey God too. They need to obey and honor their parents. God has something to say to children. That's great. Now, Pastor, what are God's words to teachers and to pastors? Well, teach the word, rebuke, exhort, correct, hold fast to the apostolic teaching. Those are God's words to pastors. And you know what? Prophets are supposed to tell that to other prophets, right? Pastors are supposed to tell that to other pastors. Pastor, what are God's words to the magistrate? Crickets. Total silence. Really? Really? God has nothing to say? God has nothing to say to magistrates? God has nothing to say about justice? He has nothing to say about how to fight injustice in society? That has been my experience. And I believe that is a problem. And this room does not demonstrate that clearly. But that has been a problem, and that is what has led me to where I am today, is seeing that problem and going, I don't believe that to be the case. I believe God's word does speak to issues in civil society. I believe God's word does have a lot to say about how we institute justice. God's word is not silent. We are not apolitical, right? Politics is not amoral. That means without morals, right? It's not. Issues of right and wrong are in the political realm, right? So therefore, God has something to say about it. All right. Let's look at some scripture together real quick about advocacy. Proverbs 31:8. I know it's kind of small, but you'll just have to trust me as we fly through this. Proverbs 31:8. Open your mouth for the mute. Watch for the themes as we read here. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth. Judge righteously. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Micah 6, he has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Amos 5, hate evil, love good, establish justice. Where is justice established? In the gate. In the gate. Isaiah 1, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. Are you picking up on the theme here? Doing justice, establishing justice at the gates. Jeremiah 22:3. Thus says the Lord, do justice and righteousness, and deliver from the hand of the oppressor him who has been robbed, and do no wrong or violence to the resident alien, the fatherless, and the widow, nor shed innocent blood in this place. Well, okay, the themes here. Establish justice. Judge righteously, seek justice at the gates. So not only are we supposed to be doing something, there's a place where we're supposed to be doing it. That's why I'm using a different term. That's why I'm using advocate, to try to point out that there is in fact a place that we should be going, a place that we should be going to seek to establish justice. And that's what I want all of us to be doing. So advocacy is the political aspect of discipleship. It's the church as a body, the whole church. It's the church's discipleship to the civil government. It is God's words to the magistrate. And it's about speaking, right? None of you are scared of that, right? Everyone wants to go speak. We want to go speak, but we just want to know, where do we go speak? All right, so we're going to be talking about speaking. Let's hear from Jefferson quickly. I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. If you heard Bradley quote Jefferson the other night about the despotism of oligarchy, this is from that same letter. This is a very short letter. You should go look it up. But Jefferson believes that the power is in the people. That's where the power really lies, right? That's why he was refuting his friend, saying, no, the power is not in the court. It shouldn't be. Where is the power for real? Where should it be? Well, it should be in the people. If enough Christians are acting out their Christianity by speaking in the gates, it will have an effect. So if we're not getting the effect that we want at the gates, what's the corollary? That there's not enough speaking going on. That's what's lacking. There is not enough speaking going on at these gates such that we don't get justice at these gates. So if we're just educating, if we just have education without action, then it is useless. But at the same time, we don't want to just go out and do things without understanding what it is that we're doing. Action without thought and education is destructive. So we need to do the right thing. So I want all of us to do something. I want us to also think about what we're doing and think about it strategically. I want to think about it long term. What are the long-term effects of what we're doing? All right, so that's my intro, guys. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's get into some of the specifics now. So where are the gates? Where do we go speak? So you all agree with me now, right? That was really easy to get you to agree with me. You all agree with me that we should be speaking. Now where do we go? All right, let's talk about that. Well, do we go here? Is this where we go? Is this a gate, though? I mean, yeah, kind of. It is technically the gates. This is a place where policy happens. Is it a good use of our time? How about here? Are these our gates? Do we go here? Is this a good use of our time? Well, I would say this. Probably not for anybody in this room, right? It's absolutely gates, so to speak. It's absolutely a place where society is organized and administered and regulated, but is it a good use of our time? Probably not. I won't speak for you. You figure that out on your own. But I don't go there, and I don't have any plans to go there because I don't think it's an effective use of our time. I think we can be far more effective elsewhere. So where are the gates? Well, I think this might be a pretty good summary of what gates could look like. So yeah, federal level, that's a gate. The state level jurisdiction, yeah. Local level, municipality, county. Party might be a gate. Republican Party. Perhaps some other party that doesn't even exist yet. Church even. Church is a place where society gets organized. I mean, not legislatively, right? But it is a form of government, and it does exert pressure, if you will, upon individuals, right? That can occur. Like, hey, you should not do that. Shape up, right? That's a form of pressure. That's a form of regulation of an individual. So that occurs. So yeah, I'm going to put that in the realm of gates. So I don't go to the federal level, as I've already made clear. I think it's much more difficult. It's much more expensive. I quite frankly don't have that much money or time to really be effective at that level. But there are people who are. I'm friends with some of them, and I think they're doing great work. More power to them. But we as individuals, where should we be spending our time? Well, let's talk about Oklahoma for a minute. Where are the gates? So Oklahoma is divided into 48 Senate districts and 101 House districts. So that's a total of 149 people who are representing Oklahoma and the values of Oklahomans. There's also 77 counties and roughly 600 incorporated municipalities, cities, towns. We'll get into that here in a bit. We must begin to think more locally, I think. Something that is more within our reach as individuals. Something we can do with our families, right? Discipleship. Something we can do to disciple our children. I hope that as I continue to speak and we continue to dialogue in this tonight, that you start having a vision of how your family can be involved in this process. Now in Texas, organization's a little different. We have 31 Senate districts, not quite as many, actually. And we have 254 counties. Every state's going to be different. Some of my examples tonight are just going to come from Texas, because that's just what I know. I'll try to point that out. So if you find in your state that it's different, please, you can tell me about it, but please don't hold me accountable to it. I'm probably going to get your state wrong. But we have a little bit of a different structure at some points. So, kind of these three levels is kind of where I've been working for the last few years: Republican Party level, state level, and community level. And I want to just talk about those tonight. So we've had some success. God has blessed our efforts, thankfully. So let's talk about the Republican Party for a while. Now, when I say Republican Party, please don't hear presidential election. Don't hear that from when I say that. Do not hear national politics. Please do not hear CNN and Fox News talking about what's going on in the White House. Please don't hear that, because that is not what I mean. I am not talking about the Republican National Committee. I am talking about your local Republican Party. I'm talking about your state Republican Party. So you have a party, Republican Party, most likely in your county. There are some counties where there aren't one, but for the most part, almost every county that has more than 10 people has a Republican Party, even if they meet in a phone booth. They exist. And then there's one for your state. Every state has a state-level Republican Party. So let's talk about the Republican Party of Oklahoma for a bit. So what is it that the Republican Party of Oklahoma and the other states, what is it that they do? I'm going to try to convince you to go here. Well, let's understand what it is. What do they exist for? Well, they exist to promote the member values. So if you're a member of the party, their existence is supposedly to take from you what you want to have happen and to codify it, to write it down, and then to go out and facilitate that. It's a bunch of people coming together and saying, hey, we have some overlapping values here. We should work together as a group, right? That's what it's supposed to do. It does this through what they call a platform, which would be like, these are the things we stand for, or perhaps it does it through principles, like these are the principles that we stand for, through rules. The rules are how the Republican Party itself governs itself, how you can operate in the Republican Party and be effective and change the rules and change the platform and hopefully go out and change policy, because again, that's our goal, right? Change the law, change the culture. Elections, it's involved with elections. Well, if you want to get abolition, right, in the long run, we need abolitionist candidates, right? That's what we need. We need people at the legislative level who are abolitionists, who are working on legislation, who are like, not just pro-abolition, who are like, yeah, I want to run all the plays. Those guys, they're everywhere right now, right? We want guys who are like, no, I want abolition. And I'm going to say no to all those other things. That's where we want to get. And if you can't go to your legislative body and then convert them to think that way, by the way, it's pretty rare. Like I'm not going to do this, but if you wanted to count all the legislators who have actually filed, abolitionist legislation, only a few of them are actually abolitionists, right? So we actually have to run candidates. You have to be candidates one day, or you have to find people who are candidates, right? Well, that's what the Republican Party is for. It's for electing people that the members want. At least that's what it's supposed to be for. We can talk about how well or not well they do that, and there's a lot of depth there, and it really varies by county and it varies by state. But in general, a party is supposed to get Republicans elected. So they can drive state policy, right? Yes, question.
Are you going to have a time later for questions, or should I ask?
Absolutely, I will have a time later for questions if we run out, but I'm totally cool with interrupting and just asking a question.
Okay. It's about the idea behind an abolitionist bill versus an abolitionist legislature or whatever, the person.
Yeah.
Is there so you would you advise not pushing an abolition bill if the person pushing it isn't an abolitionist?
So we have not taken that approach. There will have to be certain understandings and certain agreements to be had with that legislator. In our case, with Tony Tinderholt, we've not been under any illusions that he is an abolitionist. We've tried to have him become one. We have publicly said he is not. He is the guy. He's one of the guys who has a good heart and wants to run all the plays, right? So we have to try to counter that and say, well, we don't think that that's a good strategic way to approach things, and we also don't think it's the right thing to do, right? But is it better to do that? Like, which is better, to have a bill with that kind of guy, or to have no bill? That's a question you'd have to answer. Now, some people are going to disagree with me on this. In fact, there are people here who do disagree with me on this. That's okay. You got to make that decision for yourself. For us, what we wanted to have happen was that the legislator would be unwilling to back down, right, when we filed the bill. No compromise on the bill. We were not demanding that he agree with us 100% on the running all the plays ideas, right? Does that answer that question? But guys, we could do a whole talk on that. Great question. Yeah, go ahead.
So, what would you consider someone like him? Why would you say he's not an abolitionist?
Okay, so why would we consider?
If he's, sponsoring an abolitionist.
Why is he not an abolitionist? That's a great question. Let's see. So he is pro-abolition. He believes that we should abolish abortion. He isn't willing to stop trying incremental measures that compromise what we see as the principle. So what we're saying is ignore Roe. The other bills, which are not abolitionist bills, do not defy the Supreme Court. They do not ignore Roe. They comply with Roe. So you cannot comply with Roe and ignore Roe simultaneously. Those are incongruent. And so someone who is not ready to do that, I would say that's not abolitionist. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so back to the Republican Party for a minute. And I am going to talk about the state level too, so we can continue this, but thank you for the great questions. What does the Republican Party do? Well, they can drive state policy. I think they do this by uniting the grassroots voice. And who is the grassroots? Well, we are, right? The members of the Republican Party. So it is an apparatus that is made up of the Republican voting public of Oklahoma or of your state. So why should we go there? Well, we should go there because it is a republic form of government, like the Republican Party itself is a republic, right? It is a bottom-up organization. At least it's supposed to be. I believe grassroots action is actually one of the keys to abolition. So using this apparatus is actually, I think, very important because there's a lot of foundational work there. Being involved in elections, having a bunch of people who have the experience and knowledge about how to run elections, how to get the right people elected. That is all an apparatus that has to exist, and that exists in the Republican Party. If you don't use the Republican Party and you want to be effective politically, you have to build that apparatus. You have to have that. So unless you're willing to do that, perhaps we should use the one that's over here, right? But another great reason to go to the local GOP, well, there are a lot of people who agree with us. They just don't know it yet. They haven't been introduced to it yet, right? The people that I've met, that I've introduced to this, they already agree. It's very rare that I meet people at that level who disagree. They're usually on board. They're like, well, yeah, I already believed that. Okay, great. Do you know what's going on at your state level? Have you seen the bills that your pro-life lobbyists and pro-life organizations have been filing? Things like dismemberment bills, right? These very weak bills that we all, do not like and do not think, number one, accomplish anything, but also are compromising, right? Compromising our principles. Well, they don't necessarily know about that. They haven't necessarily been exposed to that. Like, I'll go to a Republican meeting, and I'll just do a presentation. I'll just quickly go do a quick rundown about what's actually been filed, and I tell them what it does, and it's like audible, like guffaw. What? You're telling me that's what's going on? It's like, yeah, you didn't know that? No, we didn't know that. We've been sending money to these people. You should stop. You should find somebody who's doing righteous legislation, support that. So there are people there who already agree with us, and we should go to them. So when you influence your local party, I believe it actually has ripple effects. It actually ripples farther than you probably will ever know. But it goes into the state, and then you can start to build momentum, and you can actually start to steer your state's policy in a different direction. And that's one of the things we've been trying to do. And the party can do that. The party can state policy if that's what the people want, right? So again, the theme of tonight is kind of like speaking. Well, going and speaking. Well, go speak to your Republican Party. Why? Because you want to steer them to change public policy. Yes?
Student here. I can name 3 people running for office in Ohio right now that are abolitionists.
Wow.
Either they call themselves that, or
Okay.
they've admitted to us that that's their policy. They are opposed by the GOP because they're not the establishment person.
Yeah.
And so how do you, to me it's fruitless. Like I
Okay.
talked to my local Republican Party and they actually had printed out the equal protection for posterity thing and they're like, well, this is really nice that you believe in this, but
Right.
no, this is too hard. And I'm trying to, my husband and I are trying to convey like,
Right.
they're like, no, sorry, we're more interested in having you do this thing.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question, and let me summarize this, and you tell me if I'm correct. You've been hitting roadblocks at your Republican Party. Where are you located?
Ohio.
Big city, small city?
I'm near a big city.
Yeah.
But the representatives or the candidates I'm talking about are actually kind of all over.
Okay. I would say this, it's going to be a lot easier in a rural area than it is in a city. Okay? You can talk to a guy back here who's a precinct chair in Harris County and outside of Houston. Very difficult. I'm in a rural area. It's a lot easier. That's an interesting divide. You could do an entire talk on that. So I don't want everybody to think that this is easy. I want you to think that it's worth your time. So to answer that question, I would say it takes some time. It takes some time to make it happen. But I'm hopefully going to present you with some more evidence about why we should keep doing it. Okay, so stay with me. Yes, do you have a question?
Piggyback on that, I'm also from Ohio, and I'm just showing up to events and meeting
Yeah.
people running for office, and people ask me, how do you even get in touch with them besides writing an
Yeah.
email? Show up and show your face.
Yeah, politics is local.
Yeah, you show up.
Yeah, showing up. Let me just say that. Like, politics is about showing up. Politics goes to those who show up. Like, I didn't show up to my local Republican Party and the next week have everything going the way I wanted it. No, it took years. Like, and I'm in a rural area. Okay, so it is not an overnight thing. Go ahead.
The candidate that I was talking about considered herself pro-life because that was the only thing that she really knew. You know, she's against abortion and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
now she's an abolitionist. And the senator that she's running against in the district that I'm talking about, District 26, Ohio Right to Life, is endorsing the regulation pro-life guy when she came out as an abolitionist. Like, he got the big endorsement. So for a lot of people not knowing what abolition is, they're like, what? She must be pro-abortion because
Right.
she didn't get the nomination of Ohio Right to Life.
And that's a
The Ohio Right
rural-ish
to Life.
area.
Yeah, the Ohio Right to Life. It went with the
Yeah.
lesser.
Oh, there's certainly, yeah, and so just summarize that a bit. If I could, it's just, there's going to be confusion, there's going to be education. This is part of that fight. Like, this is part of the war, right? And when I say war, I don't want to just flippantly toss that word around. Like, this is the alternative to war, right? Like, I can go off on a tangent. I mean, this is better than going at each other with knives and guns. This is way better. Way better. There are places in the world where they don't do this. When you want someone else's stuff, you go take it, right? And when you, as the defender, want them to not take your stuff, you have no recourse but to go to war, right? Well, here, we don't want people to take our stuff, and we want murder to end. We want to protect people who are being preyed upon. We have a means to do that. This is one of those means, and this is far preferable. But it is war. It is not the same type of violence. It is not violence, hopefully, at all, but it is speaking and affecting the policy which governs people's lives. that is a good alternative to other places around the world. So number one, we need to be thankful that that exists and that we exist in that, and it's still possible. And I'm telling you, it is still possible, but it is a lot of work, and it takes years. So part of getting this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Part of getting your family involved here is recognizing, and the recognition on your part, that this is multi-generational. This isn't something that you're necessarily going to one day, in your late 60s, go, man, whew, I'm glad I did that. Look at all I did. I can now hang up my hat. No, no, you're going to be passing the baton. That's what this is. This is passing the baton. This is eternal vigilance. That's what this is. Okay, everyone's going to have different levels of success and different levels of failure. So hopefully tonight I'm going to share a little bit about our success. I hope others have some success, and we've had some failures too. I don't know if I actually put too many of the failures in there, but we've had them. Might be interesting to talk about that someday. But yeah, you're going to hit that, and you're going to hit people, even within the party. Like in Texas, there's at least 5 different factions of the party, right? And I'm like abolition is supported by 2, maybe 3 of those factions, right? So like even within that, there's like power struggles within the party that you have to understand. Generally speaking, the people in power, they're referred to as the establishment, right? Well, the establishment, they don't want you coming in and bringing all this stuff that's going to stir up trouble. We like things the way they are, right? Why? Well, that's because the sort of perspective we're bringing, right? The sort of perspective about Christianity and what Christianity should be doing and ought to be doing, that perspective has been absent for a while. So when you walk in and you're like, radical Christianity. And they're like, no, thank you. That's not. They should maybe expect that. Sometimes not.
Do you have platform language that you could share?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to actually show a little bit of it here in a bit, and then we'll be circulating some that we're going to be taking to the Republican Party in the next 60 days when our conventions are starting. All right, great questions, thank you. Yes. All right. So the sum of this is because we should be going to the Republican Party because there are many opportunities to speak. Sometimes, for those of you who go out in the street and do street preaching or do public calls to repentance, right? You understand that failure of them being receptive to your message isn't actually failure, right? You're with me on that? It's the same thing here. Sometimes just the proclamation is success. You're going to get a lot of that. We have that opinion at the legislative level too. Like just going to a legislator's office, and I see some people in the room who've actually have done this with us, like going into the legislator's office in Texas and tell them, hey, you ought not to do that. You should do this. Why? Because God says. Well, why should I care what God says? Because he's going to judge us if we don't. Like going and doing that in fact is a form of success. So sometimes redefining what success means, it isn't necessarily getting a compromised, watered-down policy passed. Like, is that really success? Anyway, so there's a whole thing to be thinking about there. All right, so let's talk about the Republican Party some more. So how is the Republican Party organized? So I want you to go do this. I want you to go to your Republican Party, and it's going to help you to understand how it works and how it's organized. So I hope you can read those really small words there. I can make all this available to everybody afterwards. But your local Republican Party begins at the county level, the county Republican Party. It has officers, has a chairman at the top. That's an elected position by the people of the county. Republican voters in the county elect this chairman. He appoints a vice chairman, a secretary, a parliamentarian, and a treasurer. Sometimes those can be from people who make up a second part of the local party called the executive committee. But sometimes it can also be people who aren't part of the executive committee. It could be just some guy who's like, you know what, I really know Robert's rules really well, but I don't want to actually advocate for an issue. Or they're willing not to advocate for their pet, issues. They're willing to lay that aside because they're going to be a parliamentarian, for instance, right? They want to make sure this is fair and that we're all allowed to speak and things like that. But the executive committee, which is the second part of a party, so you have the officers and the executive committee. So the executive committee is supposed to be the power of the party. It's the people who are also in elected position by the Republican voters in the county to be on the executive committee, and they're the ones who vote on what the local parties should be doing. So if you want to think about it, they set the policy of that local party. So if we're looking for places to go speak, and if we're looking for places to go talk about abolition and other things, there's many other things that we care about, right? This is a good place to be. Now, if you've been going to your local party meetings and you're not on this executive committee, you don't technically have a right to speak. Okay? So I actually went to my local party for years before I had a right to speak. But I was still able to talk with people, meet people. Your local politicians come there when it's time to get elected because they want to talk about why you should elect them, right? So it's almost like a water cooler sort of effect. You get to meet a lot of the people in your county who are responsible for carrying out the business of your county and carrying out the business of your local cities and your commissioner's court and your sheriff's office and your local police department. And you get to meet all these people, and like, that's good. You should know those people, right? You should know your local sheriff and who he is, right? You should know that, right? So there's a lot of like tangential benefits of just going to these meetings. But where I want you to go and start thinking about is becoming a precinct chair. A precinct chair is a person who is on that executive committee. You have the right to speak in the meeting. You have a right to raise motions, to raise points of order, to ask questions. You have a right to steer and to try to persuade your other executive committee members about what they should be doing, what you should be doing collectively as a party. And as a precinct chair, you represent a district. So if you saw the picture of Oklahoma that I was at a few minutes ago, we subdivided that into all the counties, right? Well, I could blow up every single one of those, a photo of those counties, and then it's subdivided as well. Every one of those counties is subdivided into little districts, right? And so a precinct chair is the lowest level of the Republican Party's, governance level. So you represent a block of voters in that precinct, and that's why you're a precinct chairman. You're a chairman of that precinct, okay? But all the precinct chairmen from all the districts of the county together make up the executive committee. And like I said, by voting on the primary, or if there's a vacancy in the Republican Party meetings, in the local county meetings, a vacancy can be filled by a vote of the precinct chairs. So you could run for precinct chair, put your name on the ballot, get elected. You might have a challenger who you have to campaign against, depending on where you are, depending on the population. In a more rural area, you're probably going to have vacancies open. You may look up your precinct and go, there is no precinct chair. You should definitely start going to those meetings. Absolutely, you should start going to those meetings. And don't ask to fill the vacancy on the first meeting. Get to know people. Start talking to people, right? Start learning or making friendships. Start understanding where people are. Start looking for opportunity. This is all about opportunities to speak. Where do we go speak? Well, this is a place. There are opportunities here. If you want to get on an executive committee where you're guaranteed the ability to speak, this is a great way to do it. All right, let's talk about that second bullet there, state Republican Party. So now take what I just taught you a little bit about the county level, now extrapolate that out to the state. It's a very similar structure, just a lot more people involved. You have the state Republican Party, has officers, it has a chairman. Now the chairman is not elected by, at least down in Texas, I actually didn't read the Oklahoma rules fully yet, but the chairman in Texas is elected by the delegates at what's called the convention. I'm going to talk about a convention here in a minute. The vice chairman in Texas is also elected. The secretary, the parliamentarian, and the treasurer are appointed by the chairman. And in Texas, we have what's called the State Republican Executive Committee. Now, it's similar to the executive committee at the county level, but the way they're elected is different. They're elected by the delegates at convention. Now, here in Oklahoma, it's a lot more complex, very complicated. In Texas, I would say it's much more representative. I can go to convention, I can participate in my Republican Party of Texas convention, which ours is coming up here in the next couple months. I can be a delegate to that, And then I can cast my vote for my executive committee member. And I do that with the people who live in my area, okay? So it is very representative. Now here in Oklahoma, it's a lot different. I think I copied it here. It's by appointment. The chairman is on the board, the vice chairman, the governor, if he's Republican, is on the executive committee. The chairmans of several different Republican organizations like Young Republicans or Federation of Republican Women. There's several other organizations. The chairmans of those organizations are on the executive committee. Some of your county chairmen are on the executive committee. They have to meet some requirements. It has to be a big enough county, and they have some ways to figure out what are the big counties. There's more to it than that, but it's not as representative, I would say. It's not something that the delegates necessarily choose directly. So that's an interesting difference that I was a little surprised at. So, but why should we do this? Why should we go here? Why should we learn all this structure? And I'm not even going to get into like how you would go about speaking there, but write it down. Go look up Robert's Rules. Learn your Robert's Rules. That's how those meetings are organized. That's how they're governed. You need to know that. You need to learn that. You don't have to learn it before you go. Go before you learn it, but you will need to learn it as you start to speak and influence. That's what we're talking about here. Where do we go to speak? Where do we go to have influence? This is an opportunity. Learn your Robert's Rules. Learn the right way to speak at these meetings so that you can be heard. So I've briefly covered some of these already, but we'll just go through this. So party meetings, generally speaking, you're looking at least a quarterly meeting at the party. There might be subcommittee meetings. Sometimes Republican parties meet every month. It really depends on where you are. You're going to have to figure that out. You're going to have to go determine how often does this meet? How often can I commit to going? Maybe you can't go every month. Maybe you can't. Maybe you can only go once a year. I don't know, but you need to go in some capacity. You can influence candidates. That's another way that you can. That's another reason you should go. You should be going to these meetings because, like I said earlier, the candidates are coming to these meetings, right? What they're running as is a Republican. Their name is on the ballot because this group of people agreed for their name to be on the ballot. If they didn't agree, they're not on the ballot. So that's some level of influence, right? And you get to know these candidates before probably the public even knows them. You can have some influence. If you have two guys in a race and you're evaluating them and realizing that one of these guys is great, but then you realize that guy ran in the Democratic Party last year. Now he's running this, in this party. That might be worth knowing, right? Was that a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to comment on that because we got involved before we even kind of went to this talk, and before we even got involved in abolition, we started going to our local county Republican executive committee. And we didn't know the power that you have as a citizen when you get involved and become a part of that.
Right.
Bills, things that influence that go to the higher up, and then all the, like you said, all the people running for their districts will come, and then they'll do like a speech. You have several different people running for different areas.
Right.
And they'll have a speech, and they're all Republicans. But then you'll get one lady will say, "Well, I'm pro-choice."
Sure.
And they give these questions.
Much more likely to hear that in a city. Yeah.
And so, just because they say they're Republican, there's a big difference.
That's correct.
And they put their official stamp of approval on who they want to pick, and then that gets publicized.
So to summarize what you were saying, when you go and you see these candidates at your local Republican Party, which you guys have been doing, just because you have once we say this, like, well, yeah, we kind of know this to be true, but yeah, it's you kind of see it. It's like, yeah, you can call yourself a Republican, and we're miles apart on what we believe, right? And there isn't a lot of policing around what it means to call yourself a Republican, right? And that depends on where you are. But that's a perennial problem. You're going to see that everywhere. Is to what degree do we police that? To what degree is it the responsibility of the local party to say, no, this is what it means to be a Republican? Or is that just the people of the district who are responsible for that by their voting? Like if the voters vote to elect someone who's pro-choice, this happens in Houston. There is a pro-choice Republican in a district in Houston who keeps getting elected. Is it the party's job to prevent them from running? Or is that the responsibility of the voters? That is a long debate. That is what we call a holy war. Like, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but that is a debate that you will run into, and that is an open question, and different parties handle it differently. So let's talk about conventions for a minute. So again, what's the theme here? Influence, speaking, proclamation, right? Where's the other opportunity to do that? Conventions. So the conventions, and this is in Texas, I'm fairly certain that Oklahoma works in a similar way, but our convention process is every 2 years. And the convention process is where you have an opportunity as the members of the Republican Party, also known as the delegates to the convention, right, to change the party. Like literally anything. You don't like this rule? Great. Convince everybody that it's wrong, right? It's hard. Get a coalition together. Say, this rule is terrible. Well, why is it terrible, Wes? Well, because it allowed this to happen. And that's bad, and we don't like that. So we should change that rule. Okay, that's a good idea. Can you get a coalition together? Can you get your fellow delegates to agree with you for changing the rules, for changing the process, for changing the governance about how the Republican Party itself works? You can run resolutions, and this is one thing that we've done, and I'm about to talk about that some more. But what is a resolution? Well, a resolution says, I think we ought to say this, or I think we ought to do this, or I think we ought to say that they should do this, right? Like it's a statement. It's a statement about belief, or it's a statement about what we want them to do. And when I say them, we're generally talking about government, right? I want the legislature to do this, or I want the governor to do this. So it is a statement of the voting body who participates in the delegate process, the convention process, saying we as a body of Republican voters and delegates think that the legislature or the governor or anybody should do this. And then we watch and see what they do. It's almost like a passive way of saying, we're watching, we're observing, we're going to hold you accountable. That's kind of what the implicit statement is there, right? So what did we do here? So we got several years ago, 2016, we ran some resolutions and ran, I think, 2 of them. And one of them came out of what I talked about at the very beginning, like what would it be like if we had a bill that actually ended abortion? So what we said is, we as a Republican Party want a bill that ends abortion. It's kind of what we said. So this is actually a current version. I guess I could have just told you that it looked like a piece of paper. But it kind of looks like this. You kind of have a couple maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs at the top, right? And you say, this is what we want. Resolved. We want this. We want to end abortion. We want to call it murder. We want it criminalized. We want to defy the Supreme Court. We don't want to back down. We want, equal protection for all. That's what we want, right? And then below this, I kind of have defenses of that, right? And the defenses of that are kind of like for you, right? So let's say you're gonna run this. Well, this is kind of like you're gonna read this to them, or this is your notes about what you're gonna say to defend this proposition, right? But you're also gonna print out 100 of these, right? And you're gonna take it to your conventions and you're gonna hand them out, and you're gonna say, hey, you should agree with this. Here are the reasons you should fight for this too, right? So you're getting coalitions. We want to do this together. This is why we should. Go ahead.
So I can't quite read that. Can you use scripture?
You can. Can you use scripture in these? You can use whatever you want in these. You can use scripture. You can use statistical data. You can use existing law. These are your words. This is you persuading people that this is the way things ought to be, and here's why.
I tried to do that when I was on my county board, and the chairman would not let it go. He would sign on if I use other, reasons,
Right.
reasons or still good reasons, but
Yeah.
I was forced to do it just to move it on.
So let's talk about that for a minute. So your chairman wouldn't allow it to go on. That's interesting. What do the other executive committee members think about that? Or was this at a convention?
It was a county board.
Okay.
Yeah. These county boards can do resolutions too, and they
Okay.
can move, tell the legislature we want to see this happen.
Sure.
And so, I don't know, I didn't get a whole lot of people supporting.
Right. So you didn't have a lot of traction. How many times have you been there to those meetings before you did that? Yeah. In my experience, it might take a while. Your mileage may vary. My advice would be perhaps don't do that on your first or second meeting. Maybe wait a while. Maybe let them get to know you a bit, right? It's politics, right? Hey, I have this radical idea no one's ever tried before. I want you guys to agree to it. Whoa, that seems risky. We don't want to do that. Okay, fair point. So I've experienced the same thing. I've gone in a little too quick, too eager sometimes, and been shut down. It's like, well, maybe it's because they didn't know who you were. Maybe because they didn't know, what you stood for, right? That's a possibility. Like, I don't know your specific scenario. That's what comes to mind is maybe give it some time, get to know people for a while. For me, it actually happened kind of accidentally, right? Like, I wasn't allowed to speak about these things for a while, right? I couldn't go in and just start talking. I had to get to know people because that was literally the only way to influence them, because they wouldn't let you speak. And then it just, as they got to know me a little bit better, and then I got to the point where I could speak, well, then they listened, right? So that was my experience in that process. Yeah, next question.
So what is the end result if you get a resolution passed by the committee?
So what is say again, last part?
What's the end result? Like, what's the goal to get a resolution passed by committee?
So what is the goal, what is the end result of getting a resolution to pass getting a committee to pass your resolution? Well, you're trying to change the policy of the Republican Party, and by doing so, you're trying to then use the Republican Party to change the policy of your state. So that's where you're headed.
I know in the Republican Party, at least in our state, it is to eliminate abortion, like end it. So
Yeah.
how would an abolition resolution, if it passed, change what's already existing on our
Yeah.
state?
So how would, if you have in your platform already language that seeks to end abortion, what does an abolitionist resolution contribute? Like, what's the distinction, right? Well, that really depends. It depends on what your platform says. So the term for that is platform, right? A platform is, these are the beliefs of the delegates of the Republican Party of 2016 or 2018 or 2020, right? Because they get together every 2 years to remake those policies. So the convention process is just about remaking those policies. So when you start at your county conventions, it actually begins earlier than that. It begins at your precinct convention. You start at your precinct convention, and then you go to your county convention, and you pass on the work that the precinct did to the county. And then someone at the county, gathers up all the work that the precincts did, and then they do the work of the county convention. And then you gather all that work up, and you send it on to the state. And so has every other county in your state done that. And then that's why your convention takes a week at the state level. The Texas convention is 8,000 delegates. 8,000 delegates, okay? That is the largest political event in the world, okay? It takes them a whole week to get everything organized, and that's not enough time, okay? So what they're doing is they're remaking that platform. So what does a resolution from you affect? Well, potentially everything. It depends on what you're changing. So what I would say is get familiar with what your platform says, find a spot that you're like, that's pretty close to what we want, maybe go try to change it, or maybe figure out how it got there and who did it. Maybe you don't want to change it. Maybe you want to add to it. It kind of depends. That's more of a strategic question. If it's terrible, then change it. Get rid of it. See what happens, right? But that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to change the direction of the Republican Party. Maybe people in your party don't know that that's what it says, and they're all like, that's terrible. We should change that. Well, then you're gonna have some success there, right? So it really kind of depends on what your platform says. So read your platform. All right, so this is a resolution. This is not the one we ran first, but it's similar to it. And then here's some literature that we were distributing at the convention in 2016. This is just one page. We actually had like a 12-page piece of lit, which you got to understand, 8,000 delegates, right? So we had to figure out like, okay, how many of these we print? They're not cheap. And how much level of reading are we going to get here? Like people are. Most of the time, people are, they're walking into a room to conduct a little business, right, for their area, and they're looking at their chairs, and it's got like 12 pieces of paper on it. Like every chair has 12 pieces of the same piece of paper on it, because someone's walking in that room and literally like just doing that to the chairs, right? Just like throwing literature on the chair, because they got to go hit 8,000 chairs, right? or their group has to hit 8,000 chairs. And it's normally like a push card, like a political push card, like vote for me, right? So we're dropping this 12-page pamphlet on these things. Just by happenstance, we were so late to doing this that we were on top, right? And we didn't have enough to hit every chair. So we were like, quick, every other chair. So like I was literally in a room when the meetings were about to start. I'm just like doing this, right? And people will look at this thing and go, they've never seen anything like this. They're like, what is that? So we had good literature that got people's attention. And understand, they're about to sit in a meeting that's a little boring. So now they got something to read. And it's calling abortion murder, right? And it's like really calling out the pro-life lobby. And they're like, what is going on? This is nuts. Who did this, right? That got us some attention. It really did. It was because of that sort of thing that we had people coming, like legislators coming up to us and saying, what is this? What are you talking about? This is interesting. So it made a big splash, kind of unintended, like totally unintended. We weren't seeking to necessarily make a big splash. I didn't know what was going to happen. But we took a group of volunteers. We took this resolution. The first thing we did was, when we had this idea, we were a little short on time because we had this idea, hey, let's try a resolution. And we had a few days to get it together. So I didn't have time to really spread it across the state. So, but what I knew I wanted to do was get as many counties as possible to do this resolution, right? Because you get all these counties doing this, and again, it kind of starts low, and then it kind of builds up the county, and then it goes up the top of the state. And so if you're a person at the state level, and you're going through all these resolutions, and you're seeing the same thing over and over again, right? Whoa, a lot of people want this. That's interesting. That has meaning. Having a lot of people asking for the same thing gives it a lot of weight, right? And then you also know that people agree with you, and then you can talk about it. 12 counties, 13, 27 counties passed this same idea. They want this. The delegates want this. Like, you can do that kind of stuff, right?
How did you collaborate with the other counties?
Very poorly. How do we collaborate? Very poorly.
Well, this is important because I live in Pulaski, and it's the most liberal city and the most liberal county in Arkansas. And so, how do you collaborate where, I may not be able to be a member of the executive committee in rural Arkansas, but how do you get that done? How do you collaborate with those other committees outside
Yeah.
of your county?
So this is kind of the long-term thing. So the way we did it was by tapping into our personal networks, right? I already had a few political contacts because this was my second convention that we went to. I had gone before, so I'd made some contacts. Churches, right? The churches that I had known around the state. And then we did that with everybody. Like I tried to get all the people involved, Bradley, a bunch of other people involved that I knew, and said, okay, we're going to try this. Now, quick, go to your county. Quick, put this on Facebook. Quick, I got to make a website. Threw up a website, threw this up, started emailing it, did a quick little talk about it to a group of abolitionists and said, hey, we're going to try this thing. No one's ever tried it before. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, whoa, those abolitionists are really loud and really eager. This was before I would have called myself an abolitionist. And then we did it. And then we we did the convention process at our county levels, and we had something like, I'm probably not remembering this correctly, it's been several years, but we had like almost 20 counties, like in a matter of 5 days. In a matter of 5 days, it spread to at least 20 counties. And we had 20 counties pass this resolution at their meetings.
Just people you know in social media?
Just social media. Like wildfire is the way I would describe it. Like, I can't believe that. I wish I would have had 12 days. That was 5 days.
We don't
Yeah.
have 8,000 delegates in Arkansas.
It spread quick. And, tangent for a moment, that kind of speaks to maybe like, I don't want to say pureness, but the resonance of the message. Like people recognize it and they go, yes, that's truth. I want that. And that's an easy sell sometimes. Sometimes. We've already heard from people here where it's not. So I get that. But for the people that you want to be talking to, your allies, they're on board with this. You don't have to convince them. And that's a whole nother issue of strategy, is like, do you go out and try to convert people to believe this when they don't? Well, I would say with regards to advocacy, no. I think there are enough people that already think like you think, and you just got to find them. So it's a better use of your time when it comes to advocacy to find the coalition, not convert the coalition, right? Like, okay, if you're doing agitation, you're doing preaching, you're seeking to convert people, right? That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That is correct. If you're doing advocacy, you're trying to build a coalition. You do not seek to convert them necessarily. Why? Because that's not productive use of your time. Find the people that agree with you. Now, once you've talked to everybody in your state and you realize literally no one agrees with you, well, either move to a different state or begin the agitation, right? Like, that's when you do that. But I'm convinced that in Texas, a state with 28 million people, I'm trying to just rattle off the numbers off the top of my head, like 6 million Republican voters. I think there are a lot of people that agree with me, right? 70% claim to be Christian, only 6 million voters that vote in the Republican primary. About the same that vote, I think it's 5 million that vote in the Democratic primary. That's off the top of my head. I'm sure I'm a little off there. So I think amongst those millions of people, there's some people that agree with me, right? And the 8,000 of them that go to the delegates, that's like the people who are like really active. So like 6 million voters and 8,000 of them go to the convention, like the crazies, right? Like me, who are like, yeah, I'm so psyched up about politics, I'm gonna take a week of my vacation and go talk about policy. That's fun, right? Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody can do that. But the people who are crazy enough to go do that, you wanna be talking to them. You wanna be talking. Those are your people. They just don't know it yet. Yeah.
It's not a resolution, but as far as the wildfire sanctuary city thing going on, which is in our counties, recently the 2A, because we're kind of like building off the 2A sanctuary city thing, where we're going to use for guns and
Yeah.
for babies. So I'm doing it in my county, and then sister county's doing it also. That I'm friends with them per se, but they're not completely abolitionists.
Sure.
They want the ultimate goal is abolition, but they
Yeah.
run out of play.
I call that pro-abolition.
Yeah. So I'm trying to. My question is, they have a resolution, and the language is protection of babies, so it's not real in depth.
Yeah.
To get to the point where the little small.
Yeah, we respect the sanctity of life and we value it
Is that
from
something that you
conception
join
to death.
link arms with, because it's not really technically writing ordinances or laws yet.
Right.
It's just getting you on the platform.
Yeah, oh man. There should be there should be a whole talk on sanctuary cities. Oh wait, there was yesterday. Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So let's get back to that.
I was in the meeting with John Speed.
Yeah, so we're really excited about the possibility of sanctuary cities. Let me say this. In Texas, there are no sanctuary cities for the preborn. Contrary to what you've seen, there are no sanctuary cities for the preborn. There is a lot of, there's been a lot of, media action over it, which is interesting. It's a lot more complex of an issue, actually. And that's one of the reasons that you haven't seen us doing anything yet. Because like at the state level, we kind of already know what to do there. The city levels is a little bit more complex. Yeah, but we should definitely talk about that some more. All right, so let's keep going. Hey, we're at 1 hour and 15 minutes by my count. What's that?
15 more minutes.
I have 15 more minutes to finish? Oh my goodness, let's go quick. All right, here we go. So this is some photos of being in committee meetings. This is our convention process. This is where the first abolition resolution was passed. There's a big committee. So that was like subcommittee photos, committee photos, delegate photo. That's 8,000 people. In that room, any delegate can go to the mic if they're following rules and speak to all 8,000 of those people. Do you think that that is a good opportunity for abolitionists to talk? I do too. That's why we started doing it. That was literally the image that made me go, oh, we got to do this. Because I want to go to that mic and I want to talk about this issue to 8,000 of the most politically active voters in the state of Texas. That's who we should be talking to. That's the first people we should be talking to. Here is the next time around. There's Bradley giving a presentation to a committee about why abolition should be the only option for the Republican Party of Texas and not lesser incremental means. Okay, and he gave a great presentation on that. Here's some literature we passed out the second time around. We also did petitioning, and you can notice there it says right there at the top, immediate abolition. We were looking for immediate abolition. That's what we were, selling, so to speak. We were saying, this is what we want. Do you want this too? And I think we got about 2,000 signatures that round. It's really hard to get a lot of signatures. 8,000 people is hard to cover. We only had 20 people covering that, and we got like 2,000 signatures, especially when people want to talk. Okay, so let's summarize the Republican Party activism. Get involved. Go speak. Go to your county meetings. Go to your conventions, your local and your state conventions. Run your resolutions. Become a precinct chair. Do y'all see this right here? See this card? Do you know what this name says? This is Todd Bullis. Who knows Todd Bullis? Todd Bullis is a precinct chair. Did y'all know that? Yeah. I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy about that. And they know what he does. He didn't like walk in and go like, I'm definitely not the guy holding signs in front of those churches. They're like, oh, are you the guy who's holding signs in front of churches? He's like, yep, that's me. They're like, wow, that's really bold. It's amazing. And they made him a precinct chair. That's kind of cool, right? And he's converted tons of people to abolitionism in that county. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say no on questions because we got to go quick. But if I have some time at the end and they haven't kicked me off yet, I'll come back, okay? Okay. Did I get everything there? Yeah. Become a precinct chair. That's what I really want you to do. But I also need to talk about the state level because we have so much to do at the state level. Legislation. Running a bill is a great way to influence the culture. That's one of the reasons we're running bills. That's one of the reasons people are running bills here in this state. It rallies people to a cause. This is something that is worthy of our time. It's something that just having the bill and giving something that's a focal point, kind of like running a resolution and getting a bunch of people involved is like a focal point of something we're trying to accomplish together that's good and righteous, right? Running a bill does the same thing. And I know there's a lot of people in this room who have participated in that. It draws publicity for abolition. It actually applies some pressure on government to do the right thing. And I think one of the most important things is it actually reveals the true nature of some of the politicians, right? Because one of the perennial issues, which I'm sure a lot of you already know, is politicians don't always tell the truth. Is that shocking to anyone? No? Right. Sometimes they will say, you know what? I am the most pro-life person you've ever met. I'm double, triple pro-life. Right? It's like I can't tell you how many times we've gone into a legislator's office and their assistants tell us, their staff says, oh, he's very, very pro-life. He's very pro-life. Great. Will he sign a bill that outlaws abortion? I don't know about that. Oh, okay. Huh, that's interesting. What do you think pro-life means exactly? You know? Like, are you, and I at that point stop saying pro-life and say, is he against abortion? I would use those terms, right? Is he against, oh, he's very pro-life. Yeah, but is he against abortion? Right, okay, you get the idea. So it exposes those people. That is necessary, right? In order to get a bill passed at some future date, we don't know, we can't prognosticate about how long or how short that will be or when that's gonna happen, but we know that's where we're headed. We're changing the law, we're changing the policy, we're gonna use it to change the culture. To get there, you have to have the votes, okay? There's, how many did I say at the outset in Oklahoma? 149, I think. You need 50% plus one. You need 50% plus one. And you have a committee process before that they have to get out of. So there's an entire process there which you could spend an entire hour, 2 hours talking about how you'd go about doing that. But that has to be done. And in order for that to be done, you have to have legislators that actually want to vote for it or that you can convince to do it. Right? They don't necessarily have to want to do it, but they have to do it. All right. And it instructs the culture. By changing the law, what is the law? The law is a schoolmaster. It teaches, right? So it's not, there's often this false dichotomy of, well, we got to change the culture first before we can change that law. It's like, by changing the law, you actually will change the culture. Like, it's not a dichotomy, it's both and. You got to do both at the same time. All right, we flew through that, guys. So opportunities to speak at the legislative level. Well, hearings. If you get a hearing for a bill, there's public comment time. You can lobby directly to legislators by going directly into their offices and talking with them directly. You can influence their staff. You can actually be on their staff. Okay, back to the theme for a moment of families, getting your family involved. Have you considered training your children up to be the sort of person that would work on staff in a legislator or a senator's office? Can you imagine having a bunch of families throughout your state who are raising their children up, homeschooling their children, I pray, and sending them off to go work for legislators in your state? Can you imagine what that would look like if there were hundreds of families doing that? Can you imagine what we could do with that? Will that take 5 years? Will that take 10, 20? How many years is that going to take? Probably a few, probably 20 at least. 50, the longest, right? So something can be done, right? We can do this. Elections, you can participate in elections. You can work on campaigns. Okay, you can't commit to, being there every day. That's fine. You've got to make decisions for your own family and for your own life and what your priorities are. But you can work for campaigns. You can find abolitionist candidates. You can go block walk, go knock on people's doors, voters' doors, and tell them about this person who's an abolitionist, right? You can support good legislators. You can run for office yourself. That's a fun one. Whole conversation to be had there. So here's some of the literature that we passed out during the first bill we ran. Some of you were probably at this march and rally we had in 2017 for the bill. Had about 1,000 people there at the Capitol rallying. We followed that up with a lobby day, going to legislators' offices, talking to them, meeting with legislators. This was actually trying to convince them that we were right. Like I talked earlier about, just finding the people that agree with you. We were actually trying to convince some legislators here. We kind of did like a lobby day and education day on this. Petitioning. This is the Jeremiah's Wish petition delivery. Over 70,000 petitions were delivered to the governor's office to make ending abortion in Texas a priority. Big group shot. Going and participating in the the gallery, sitting in the gallery and letting them see you, letting them know you're there, that you're watching what they're doing. Going to hearings. Delivering more petitions to ask Jeff Leach to give HB 896 a vote. This guy's thrilled about receiving these 22,000 petitions. He's really happy about that. That's Jeff Leach's, one of Jeff Leach's staff, Representative Jeff Leach. All right, so let's summarize the legislative here, and then I'm going to watch a short video, and I think we're basically done here. Get involved, go, speak, get your family involved, train them up, disciple them to do this. Go speak at these hearings when available. I want you to listen to this real quick. This is an example of what I would say is a great example of what to say when you go to speak. I'm not sure if this is actually, now I'm a little worried about this playing now.
All right, let's have you go first. Tell us who you are, your position on the bill, and who you represent.
Okay, my name is Jennifer Madrid. I am representing myself, and I am for the bill HB 896.
Thank you.
I am a rape survivor and have been waiting 30 years to have this opportunity to support a bill that treats abortion as murder, even and especially in the case of rape. That may sound strange, but just as I didn't deserve to be pregnant against my consent, my daughter did not give consent to her murder. She did not deserve the death penalty I and my government gave her for my rapist crime. And as a teenager, I didn't deserve to carry the guilt of that for the rest of my life. Earlier, Becky Leach talked about the need to create a culture for the victim rather than a culture for the offender. I couldn't agree more. In my case, the offender got off scot-free on 2 counts when I kept my pregnancy secret and secretly had my baby aborted. The evidence for my rapist crime was destroyed, and he did not have to face the death penalty for sexual assault. And in my case, I didn't have to pay the penalty for murder when I paid to have my daughter killed. After my abortion, I spent 19 days in a psychiatric hospital, traumatized after coming home from the abortion and finding remains of my baby's mangled body. I've
Real?
spent 30 years suffering with PTSD, autoimmune disease, and cancer. Add to that the grief of the reality that when my own biological mother was faced with an unplanned pregnancy with me, she gave me life and a family through adoption. And I didn't do the same for my daughter. Today I refer to my daughter as Hannah. After receiving loving help from a Christian ministry that helped me to fully embrace the forgiveness God had for me in Jesus Christ. If you've had an abortion, there is forgiveness. And I need to shout that from the rooftops. But wouldn't it be far better if we found more kind and compassionate love and support for women who are victimized, rather than further victimizing them and their babies by encouraging and legalizing their murder? It may seem cruel to ask the woman to endure 9 months of a pregnancy she didn't choose. On its face, it would seem that way. But please hear me when I tell you that the real cruelty was telling an already traumatized teenage girl that ripping apart and killing a child would end her suffering. For me, it was only the beginning. I wish I could turn back time and suffer for 9 months rather than for 30 years. Abortion is the ultimate example of creating a culture for the offender. It enables rape, abandonment, oppression, sex trafficking, and more. And of course, we cannot forget the 63 million innocent children who have died, as we have made legal their murder by the one created to love and nurture them. Please support the only pro-life bill that creates a culture that is for all victims. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Now let's see if I can speak without crying. That's why we do this. Because you can go there and you can speak to power and you can say, the law is wrong and it destroys people. Finally, your community. There's a whole world here in this community opportunity. I just want to briefly overwhelm you with the opportunities that are available in your local community to speak. In Oklahoma, there are a total of 1,830 government units that can levy taxes against you. Okay? Every one of them has a board and a chairman and public comment. You can go to every single one of those. You can speak to them. And you need to go there. We all need to go there. I don't have any answers about the how there yet, because I'm not going to all those. I once told my wife, I could be gone every night of the week speaking at one of these places in my county of 70,000 people. Right? School boards, county commissioners. Here, let's just go through it. That's just in Texas. That's just the types. County commissioner, commissioner's court, city council meetings, state board of education, special purpose districts, education, ISDs, water and waste management, economic and community development, arts and entertainment, sports facilities, library districts, sports and community vineyard districts, public improvement districts, homestead preservation districts, municipal management districts, municipal development districts, county development districts. We don't have to keep doing this. Courts, city courts, county courts, state, district, federal, police. All of them swear an oath to uphold the Constitution. All of them. All of them should ignore Roe. All of them. If you don't think you can do this, watch one more thing and we're done.
Honorable Council members, my name is Lauren Walker. I'm 11 years old and a member of Apologia Church. I want to sincerely thank you for the time you have given me to speak today. I would like to begin by reminding you that there once was a time in American history when it was legal to own slaves, and racism was commonplace. Today we look back on that point in history and think, how could those people have treated other human beings who simply had a different color of skin with such abuse? There was also a time in American history when parents slaughtered their own children, and government did nothing about it. That time is now. People are slaughtering their own precious babies, and this council is doing absolutely nothing to stop it. There will be a time in human history when people are going to look at this moment with disgust and shame, just as we look back in repulsion on slavery and racism today. In fact, John Piper reveals that between 1882 and 1968, 3,446 Black people were lynched in America. Today, more Black babies are killed by abortionists every 3 days than all who were lynched in those years. And government is letting it happen. You should be concerned about the legacy you are leaving, but you should be even more concerned about how God is going to judge you on Judgment Day. He will judge you by his holy law, the 10 Commandments, the 6th one, which clearly states you shall not murder. Pastor and author David Platt warned us to, quote, remember God's character. He is the holy and righteous judge of all, and he hates injustice. He detests the taking of innocent life, and he is the judge of all who participate in it. God is the judge of mothers who have aborted babies, fathers who have encouraged abortion, grandparents who have supported abortion, and friends who have advised abortion. God is the judge of doctors who have performed abortions, leaders who have permitted abortions, pastors who have counseled people to have abortions, and legislators who have worked to make abortion possible. That includes each and every one of you. You will be judged for your inaction on that day, because doing nothing is actually doing something. So I urge you to stand against abortion, fight against it, do whatever is needed to ensure that Arizona State Law 13-3603 is enforced. Make Phoenix a sanctuary city for the unborn in order to follow the will of God. Consider the words of missionary C.T. Stud. Too long have we been waiting for one another to begin. The time for waiting is past. The hour of God has struck. War is declared. In God's holy name, let us rise and build. The God of heaven, he will fight for us as we for him. And the gates and minions of hell shall not prevail against us. So such men as we fear, I would like to ask you, council members, with this question. Who do you fear, man or God? God's word tells us in Luke 12, verse 5, but I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has authority to throw you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Thank you.
Amen. That's it, guys. Thank you. Well, no one's in here to pull me off the stage yet, so if anybody has any questions, Jill, you had a question. Do you want to go first, or do you want to come back to you?
So how do you run for precinct chair?
How do you run for precinct chair? A couple ways. First, start going to a county convention. County meetings. Figure out where your county meetings are. Generally, either monthly or quarterly or something like that. Go to them. Start to let people see your face. Meet people. Meet candidates. And then figure out where you live, the district that you live, is available for, if there's a precinct chair position available. If it's already filled, introduce yourself to that person, start to get to know that person, and just kind of wait. Wait for an opportunity. Maybe they're perfect for it and you don't need to. There's certainly someone you should eventually talk to about abolition.
So when you go to your precinct meeting, you still go to your meeting after, even though there's a precinct chair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can be there. It's a public meeting. Okay. Actually, so let me rephrase that. It's kind of interesting. It's a private organization, but It's an open meeting, generally speaking. Now, they can sometimes go into what's called executive session, where they ask everyone but the executive committee to leave. Very rarely happens, but that's when they discuss some sort of topic that it's a little bit more private, perhaps, or they're not ready to say it publicly. But it's treated like a public meeting is kind of the best way of saying it. And so it doesn't mean you can speak. Some places let other people speak, like they're just happy to have people there. Other places are structure. The precinct chairs will sit in the front, and you're not allowed to sit there because they don't want to mix the votes up, because they're going to be voting on stuff, and they don't want people who just show up to vote yes, no, right? So it depends on the size, depends on where you're at. But I would just start going, find out who your precinct chair is, meet them. If there's a vacancy, go, that's interesting. And then wait. Wait for an opportunity to either run by putting your name on the ballot, or finding out if they do vacancy committee type stuff, where they interview candidates to fill vacancies. I filled a vacancy. Other people in this room that I know and looking at also filled vacancies.
So in Wisconsin, we have two, quote unquote pro-life groups. One of them is a typical right to life, and the other one, Pro-Life Wisconsin. They come out to the abortion clinics. They say they want to ultimately abolish abortion. But right now, they're putting forth a personhood bill.
Right.
So what do you think about personhood bills? They say that
Yeah.
that's like the ground.
I think what do I think about personhood bills is the general question. I believe what Bradley believes on them and what he said the other night. So I would refer you to what he said about that. There's some issues with it. One of the issues with doing things that don't go all the way, that are going to be struck by, that are going to be struck down by the Supreme Court, is like, well, if you know that that's going to happen, why wouldn't you go all the way? Like, what's the point of having a half measure struck down? That's just that's a strategic question, not even getting to the moral aspect of whether or not it's right to do that or not. That's a part that I have, is like, well, if we know we're going to fight this really difficult battle, why not fight it for the final result? Any other questions?
I just have a statement. We first started with the rec. They have a Lincoln dinner. The Republican Party has a Lincoln dinner every year. And what we did, since we were on the rec, we needed volunteers to check everybody in. So me and my husband sat there and with people that come to this stuff, and they saw all our faces. Of course, we were passing on abolition stuff. And Alan West happened to come from Texas to that meeting, and David talked about abolition while he was doing book signings. So, I mean, you can be creative.
Yeah, volunteer. That's a great way to get plugged in, is volunteer. They're always looking for people to do stuff, right? And if you volunteer, that's a great way to show some solidarity and be genuine about it, yeah, we do in fact want to help out, That's a great way to do it. Great. Is that about it? All right, well, thank you guys so much. You guys are troopers for listening to me for an hour and a half. If you have any questions, feel free to come up to me. Thank you.